All right, let's practice some sentences. I'm going to prompt you with English sentences based on the grammar from Unit 1, Lesson 10, and it's going to be your job to try to translate those sentences into Korean. The first sentence I would like you to try is, my dad has 4 cars. I'll give you 10 seconds, and you can start now. Okay, the subject of the sentence is a dad, specifically my dad, but I'll talk about that in a second. The word dad is 아버지, so I'll write that here. That's the subject of the sentence, so I'll put this here. You also could put 아빠, which is kind of a more, kind of cute or colloquial way to refer to somebody's dad or your own dad. It's kind of like saying daddy, whereas 아버지 is more like saying father. This is specifically my dad or my father, so I'll put this before it to say that it's my dad. Now I want to indicate that my dad has something. That if I want to indicate that somebody has something, I want to use 있다, and I'll specifically conjugate this using the informal high respect conjugation, but you could possibly conjugate this to any of the other conjugations that you use as long as it matches up with the correct formality for I here. Now, if I just wrote the word car in here, if I just went like this just indicates that my dad has a car, or maybe my dad has cars. There's no real way to sort of indicate whether or not it's more than one car or one car. However, if I want to indicate that my dad has 4 cars, I still need to use of course, the noun 차 to indicate that it's talking about cars. However, I also need to indicate that there's a certain number of cars by using a counter. Now, the word for 4 in Korean, when I'm using it to count something, is net. However, if I'm counting something and there's a counter after that, I actually don't use this letter at the bottom and it just becomes ne. So if I want to indicate that I have 4 cars, I have to put this here, and I need to use the counter for vehicles, which is de, if I want to use the counter for vehicles. So I'm going to put de here, and then if anytime I want to indicate that I have something, I need to put this particle on the thing that the person has. So in this case, this whole sentence would read, 저희 아버지는 차 4대가 있어요. The second sentence I would like you to try is, the bus will arrive at 9:10. I'll give you 10 seconds and you can start now. Okay, the way to say bus in Korean is the very simple 버스. There is no real way to say the bus or a bus. You just simply start the sentence using the word bus. And that's the subject of the sentence, so I'll put this here. It will arrive, and if I want to talk about something arriving, the verb to arrive is 도착하다. So I'll start writing that here. However, I want to conjugate this into the future tense, and you learn how to do that more specifically and more commonly in lesson 9 in the previous lesson. So I'll use that way of doing it. I'm going to add this, followed by this, and followed by this. And there are other ways that you could do it, but this is just one particular way, and probably the most common way that you would indicate something like this in the future tense. But right now, this just says the bus will arrive. It doesn't indicate that it will arrive at a specific time. If I want to indicate that it will arrive at a specific time, because it's a time, I want to put this particle there to indicate that it will arrive at this time. But I don't know the time yet. I need to indicate 9:10 in this space. And the way that I would do this is put the number 9 followed by 시 to indicate that that's the hour. And then put the number 10 and then followed by 분 to indicate that that's the minute part of the time. And this A should actually be attached directly to that. So let me move that over so it's clear. That should actually be here. This whole sentence would read, 버스는 9시 10분에 도착할 거예요. The third sentence I would like you to try is, my younger sister is 15 years old. I'll give you 10 seconds and you can start now. Okay. The word younger sister in Korean is 여동생. 여동생. And actually 동생 just actually in general just means younger sibling, but 여 means female, and 남동생 would mean younger brother because nam means male. And it's mine, my younger sister, just like I have my father. So I'll put the same 저의 before that. That's the subject of the sentence, so I'll put that here. Now, I want to indicate, very similar to the first sentence, when I was counting cars, I had to use the counter day. In this case, if I'm counting years of age, anytime I want to count years of age, I want to use the counter 살. And specifically, so I'll write that here. Specifically, the number before the counter, in this case, the number before the counter was 4, or ne, but in this case, the number before the counter is going to be 15. So I want to write the word 15 using these Korean style of numbers. So 열 means 10, and 다섯 means 5, and really what that is just 10 and 5, which is 15. And this is the way to say 15 years old, and I can't just end a sentence like that. So whenever you want to indicate that somebody is a certain age, you want to write a sentence like this and then add ida to it. And I'm going to obviously not just write ida here. As we've been focusing on conjugations the last few lessons, I of course want to conjugate this, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it, but just because I've been doing the informal high respect in the first 2 sentences, I might as well do the same here. So it would look like this, and this sentence would read 저희 여동생은 15살이에요. The fourth sentence I would like you to try is we bought 2 glasses of drinks. And drinks, you could also translate that maybe to beverages. There's a common word that sort of very commonly translates to beverages or beverages. I'll give you 10 seconds and you can start now. Okay, the subject of the sentence is we, which is 우리. I'm going to indicate that it's the subject by putting this here. I want to use the verb to buy, which is 사다. I'll write that over here, 사다. However, this happens in the past tense, so I want to add this to it. And I'm going to not do it in this formality, but I'm going to do it in the informal high respect, which would look like this. So that's going to be the last word in my sentence, and I'll put that over here. 샀어요. Right now, this just says we bought, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I need to put in the middle to indicate that we bought 2 glasses of beverages. Well, if I want to indicate that we bought beverages, I can use the noun for a drink or a beverage for 음료수, 음료수. And right now, this would just say sort of there's no object particle here, so it doesn't really say this at this point, but I guess you could say that this says we bought beverages. But we didn't just buy beverages. We bought 2 glasses of beverages. Up here in the first sentence, we saw that I had to use this counter day to indicate that we're counting cars, and we had to use the counter here 살 to indicate that we're counting years of age. But if I'm counting glasses, I want to use the counter 잔. Now, how many glasses did we buy? Well, we bought 2 glasses. The word for 2 whenever we're counting something is 둘. However, if it's followed by a counter, in this case it is, you don't want to use this final letter and it just becomes du. So I'm going to put du here, and right now this says we bought 2 glasses of drinks, but there's no object particle here, so I need to add the object particle to this, and this would be the final sentence. The sentence would read 우리는 음료수 2잔을 샀어요. The 5th sentence I would like you to try is I taught that class 3 times yesterday. Even before you translate it, you might be thinking, well, that sentence doesn't even logically make sense. Well, I'm actually a teacher, and sometimes you actually have to teach the same lesson to multiple groups of classes. So, for example, there might be the class, 1-1, and there might be a class 1-2, and there might be a class 1-3, all different groups of kids. and you might have to teach the same lesson to those different groups of kids. That would be the sentence that I'm trying to create here. I'll give you 10 seconds to translate this difficult sentence, and you can start now. Okay, the subject of the sentence is I, so I'll put that here along with the subject particle. If I'm going to indicate that I taught something, well, I'm going to use the verb 가르치다, and I'm going to conjugate that into the past tense, and I'll do that in the past tense in the informal high respect here at the end. 가르쳤어요. Right now, this just says I taught. Doesn't say anything else, so I have to add a whole bunch of stuff in the middle to indicate that specifically I taught that class 3 times. And yesterday. So the place where I put yesterday, that can actually be put in multiple places in the sentence. I'll just put it here, although you could have also put it in other places, 어제, to indicate that it was yesterday. Before I write out the class part here, I want to talk about, there's sort of 2 words in English that mean class, and one of them is 반, and one of them is 수업. And in English, they both translate to class. 반 refers to the group of kids. So for example, if you're talking about your class, for example, if I am in the class 1-1, or there might be another class which is 1-2, and this would represent grade 1, class number 1. This would represent grade 1, class number 2. And there might be a class 2-1, and that would represent grade 2, class number 1. 반 refers to all of these things. And if you're talking about, oh, I have a friend in my class, you need to use the word 반 in that case, because you're talking about the group of kids, and in that group of kids, you have a friend in that class. The word 수업 represents the thing that is taught or the thing that is learned. So for example, if you're a teacher, you teach classes, you want to use the word 수업 for that particular sentence. You actually could say that you taught the same group of kids 3 times, and maybe I'll take a second to actually write out 2 different types of sentences, one using 수업 and one using 반. But I originally wanted this sentence to use 수업 as if I was a teacher and I taught the same lesson 3 times. So I'll start with that, using 수업 as if I taught the same lesson 3 times. I want to talk about a class, but specifically it's that class. So I'm going to say not just 수업, but specifically 그 수업 to indicate that it's that class or that lesson. This is going to be the object of the sentence, or in other words, the thing that I taught or the thing that I did. So I taught that class. Right now, this just says I taught that class yesterday, or I taught that lesson yesterday. If I want to indicate that it happened 3 times, just like the other counters we saw before, the counters for actions like this is 번, and specifically it happened 3 times. Just like the word for 4 is net, but whenever I'm counting something, it just becomes ne. And for 3, it's the same thing. The word for 3 is 셋, but when I'm counting something, when there's a counter here, this final letter gets eliminated and it just becomes 세. So this would say, I taught that class 3 times and then yesterday. In Korean, this would read, 저는 어제 그 수업을 3번 가르쳤어요. Now, let me just take a second to indicate that you actually could, if you were sort of confused about which one I was talking about, instead of saying 수업 here, you actually could say 반. Now, this would actually make perfect logical sense and grammatical sense, but the meaning would be completely different. The first one, when I use 수업, it's as if you taught the same lesson 3 times, probably to different kids, because you wouldn't want to teach the same lesson to the same kids. But this sentence, 저는 어제 그 반을 3번 가르쳤어요. That would mean that you taught the same group of kids. Maybe you taught class 1-1 3 different times. And I guess that's possible, but in this case, you probably would have had to have taught them different lessons. Maybe, for example, you're a history and a geography and a PE teacher. And in that case, you might have taught them in history, you might have taught them in geography, you might have taught them in PE. And in that case, you actually saw that class 3 different times. So if you use the word 반 here, or if you use the word 수업, both of them would have been correct. Just the meaning in English would be slightly different. Even though the translation might be the same, the meaning might be slightly different. Well, that was fun. I hope you learned a lot.